there's not a linear, at least for me, there's not a linear path that exists per se. I think what helped me in my life was that I was trying to be the best version of myself in what I was doing at that time, and it grew and evolved. And if my plan was to play in a symphony orchestra, and as I was playing in a symphony orchestra, I felt a little empty, and I didn't know what that was all about, and that's how it happened. So for all of you who think, it's like if I do A, B, and C, D will happen, I don't think that that's necessarily the way, it works in the creative field. We could talk about that later, and I'm sure others will as well. But so I guess where I became really fascinated was the Juilliard School, Carnegie Hall, and the Weill Institute started a program in the early 2000s where they wanted to bridge this gap that existed between teachers and professionals, and in this case, music. And by bridging the gap, I mean there were a lot of educators who were not engaged in being the best artists they could be in growing as artists and musicians. As a matter of fact, many had discontinued doing it when they started teaching. And there were many incredible musicians in the world that couldn't teach their way out of a paper bag. And what we were trying to do was really bring those two concepts together, because we found that when young students in the public schools, regardless of where they grew up, were exposed to greatness in its form, amazing, magical things happened. And we're still, involved in doing that. So I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed teaching teachers. I became a supervisor of fine arts here in Maplewood, and now I'm a dean at Montclair State University's Cali School of Music, and that was a path that obviously I was not prepared to take when I was younger. What I will say is that regardless of what your path is as far as education is concerned, we're at a very critical time in education in this nation, especially as far as arts education is concerned. It's been happening all along, and COVID has actually really exaggerated and exacerbated it more than ever before. And that is when the pandemic hit and everybody had to retreat online. And I'm going to really talk about schools and in general. Most schools shoved the arts to the side. And they didn't do it maliciously, but there was this moment where school leaders and had to decide what was essential and what was not, and what could be taught well and what could not. And unfortunately, the arts really, really suffered. And when you think about it, and we talk about this district in general, right, there are students all over the world every single year that begin a musical instrument and learning a musical instrument in the 4th grade, in the 5th grade. And from that moment, what's very interesting is, let's just say, in this district, about 90% of the students start an instrument. Did you start an instrument? Yep. 9 out of 10.
Viola.
Okay. You say that, well, we won't, viola jokes all over the place.
Don't ask me about it.
To that point, 90% start, and a year later, about 60% quit. And that is very standard around the nation. It's a problem. And then they go to 6th grade, and then by the time they go to high school, another 50% quit, and there you have it. Nevertheless, all of the students that started determined the trajectory of the program and their artistic lives from that moment, on. Well, during the pandemic, most students didn't start at all. Or they received instruction that was online and so, not okay. So we actually have a generational crisis here in arts education, as you can imagine. As the leader of a higher education institution, in about 5 years, we're going to be feeling it. And so we developed a national panel to try to address this, and what we need are creative people who are engaged in doing that as well. As a matter of fact, there's such a teacher shortage in this country right now, which is, let's add that on top of it, that we're trying to find, creatives and people who didn't think that they may be interested in doing that and becoming teachers to go and do this kind of thing. So again, I do use the word fascinating because it is, but, it's a very important time. So, back to, the original goal of this talk is how do we go about and do this, I would say, become the best artist you can be and learn how to communicate your art to different people, whether it's an audience, whether it's, through writing and through everything else. And as you're communicating, you're teaching. Because a lot of people, when I was getting trained, we didn't really learn how to communicate in those ways. We communicated musically, but I didn't, if I'm going to sit here and communicate what I'm doing and why it's relevant to the people that I'm playing for here, which we didn't get taught, then you're missing a really big piece of, yourself as an artist and basically, part of humanity, if that makes sense. So, find your best artistic self and learn how to communicate that in whichever way you can communicate would be the only thing I could tell you, and be ready to take some left turns along the way. Are we done?
Yeah. No.
That's all I've got.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really good point about, the reason why I made this whole event was to give creative people more ideas of what their options could be, not just being a trombonist, but you can do a whole wide range of things that you've done in your career as an educator, like creating programs and really just helping other people realize, their potential in creative fields, which is not just the linear thing of like start making art, continue making art, and become an artist, whatever that means.
Well, what's amazing to me is actually, since I work with, students your age now, I'm amazed at how many students, whether it's at the Juilliard School or whether it's at Montclair State University, come into the craft with a very open mind about what's possible and the paths that they can take and how to innovate in there. When I was a kid, it was like, we're trained, I'm going to get a job in an orchestra, and that's that. And I have a lot of students who are coming in and like, why don't I learn about music technology and be able to, market my stuff online and that's really fantastic, because right now, most creatives, I can't speak for all, and by the way, I believe everybody's creative, so I don't mean to make it like a bubble, but anyway, have to create something that is not there for us to continue on, as opposed to fit into something that already exists in most places. And I find that to be, really interesting as well. And so I find their younger students are just more willing to kind of, keep an open mind about the possibilities. And good things are going to happen with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
I'm Sandra Charlap, and I am from Livingston, and found my way here and raised my kids in Maplewood, and now I live in East Orange. You want to know a little bit?
Yeah, so like, how did you get started in art? What kind of art do you do, and what is your like business?
Okay. Well, I ended up, after high school, I wasn't the best student, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of college options in front of me. I didn't really know what I belonged to, and I ended up at University of Hartford and like a basic studies program, basically, pay to play. My parents would pay, I could go to college. So I went for about a year, and I moved to New York City on a whim, and I lived a few blocks from Parsons, and I thought, I'm supposed to go to college, like maybe I'll just go here, And it wasn't like I had some massive interest, I was like a doodler, but I didn't really have a lot of direction, and I was just kind of lazy. So it was 3 blocks from my apartment. I walked over and I said, what do you need to do to get in here? And so that was 1985. And I don't know how different it is now. I imagine it is quite different. But I did their take-home test, and gave them my lousy transcripts, and next thing you know, I was going to Parsons. And I walked in that door, and I thought, oh, this is really cool. Like, I love this. And all of a sudden, just being exposed to something completely different got me excited. And next thing you know, I was a really good student. And I got very passionate about all the classes. And, you know, I wasn't the best in the class, but I was probably one of the most hardworking. And that's really what's been a constant theme, is that I make art every day, mostly because I like to. And I want to see how I can translate what's going on in my head onto a surface of some kind. And I'm primarily a 2D artist. I've done a little bit of 3D work, but I'm mostly just fascinated with materials. So although I trained as an illustrator, I basically have taken illustration and found different ways to experiment with it. And so the through piece all these years later is that I'm creating illustration in a million different ways. And along that path, I've always hustled for work. And so I wasn't really good at that many other things. Like, this was the thing I was good at. And so I just made it my mission to get better and better. And the better I got and the harder I worked, the more opportunities presented themselves, and I seized every one of them. And so I think that becoming a fine artist, you know, most kids who are thinking of that as their path, their parents are like, oh God, please don't do that. You know, you're never going to make a living. And, you know, I've had times where I've made great living, and there have been times that it's been a little wonky, but I've stayed true to that path. And over the past, well, it's probably been longer, but those, as well as I can remember formally, for 15 years, I've also been an educator. And I have educated kids in nursery school all the way to seniors. I work with people with special needs, and they are my heart. Mostly what I like to do is just get in front of people and share how cool and exciting being an artist is. And so when I get people who come to a workshop or sign up for a class and they're like, it's not really my thing, I'm not good at this, I'm like, oh no, you are my people. Just come with like an open mind and an open heart, and we'll tap it. You know, just go in and don't be afraid to mess up a piece of paper or screw up a canvas. It's really no big deal. There's another piece of paper, there's another canvas. You have to go in there and you have to be willing to just make a mess of things in order to find your way through it and get something fabulous. And when you do that fabulous thing, it's like getting a hit off a drug. Like, you don't need to do drugs, because that hit, when you do something great, is so good that you're constantly chasing that next experience. At least that's how it is for me.
Yeah, awesome. So what would you say is the most important thing to make money off of your art and to succeed as an artist and not sacrifice your, you know, mental health to just like struggle to like, how do you find the balance between the struggle and being successful as an artist?
That's a really good question. You know, it is a balancing act, and you will take gigs that are not your favorite, and you get in there. If the money's good, you do it. If you're, you know, it's about facility. If I have the facility to accomplish something, even if it's not speaking to my heart and soul, as a working artist, sometimes you got to take those gigs, and that's fine, because that affords you the opportunity to continue doing the work that is your heart and soul. And, you know, I just got this like amazing commission that came in the other day. And this woman saw a painting of mine, and she's like, reached out on Facebook, which has been this enormous opportunity for me. I post things on Facebook, people see it, they're like, hey, I really like that, is it for sale? I'm like, DM me. And I have made so many sales. Like, the pandemic has been a great thing for me as an artist. I've had a captive audience who were all in their homes looking at all these bare walls, and they're floating around on Facebook. And so I was selling art like constantly. I don't think I've ever sold more art than during that period. But this woman really loved this piece that was just accepted for a show at the Newark Arts Museum. And she's like, oh, is it for sale? I said, yeah. And I gave her a price. And she said, oh, I'm going to bring it to Portugal. And then she called, I'm devastated. It's not going to fit. Can I commission you? I'm like, sure. Mm-hmm. And, I'm going to get the measurements. Well, it turned out that the sale that I lost turned into a phenomenal commission that was double the price that I initially gave her for that piece. And that piece is now still available for somebody else. So that's kind of part of the hustle of selling art, is that it's always kind of navigating and finding opportunities, holding on to those opportunities, and giving somebody something that they're going to really treasure. And just having my work in all these people's home is so cool. It's so validating to think that not only do they like it, they're willing to pay good money for it and live with it. So it's a great thing.
It's kind of the dream.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's a really cool way to make a living, and I'm so grateful that I can do it.
Yeah, speaking of selling things on Facebook, how important would you say is it to market your art to a specific audience? How do you do your marketing? How do you get your art out there for other people to see it and want it?
Yeah, those are also good questions. I have kids. I have kids who are 23 on Monday and 25. So they're all about TikTok. They were formerly more about Instagram. And I've tried those platforms. It doesn't really speak to my current audience. Now, that doesn't say that there's not another audience that I can tap. And marketing is definitely something that you have to play around with. But, play around with it and put your stuff out there and try it. And if one platform doesn't work, tweak it. Try it a different way. Try a different platform. But the fact is that nobody's going to see it just sitting in your apartment. So you have to put it out there. I apply for shows all the time. And I would say 95% of them reject it. And you just keep moving on. You just can't personalize it, because that 5% is going to get you in somewhere, somebody's going to see it, and it will bring other opportunities. So it's kind of exciting every day. I don't know what's going to be in my inbox or a phone call or meeting somebody that will turn into a really fun, challenging opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. I also wanted to ask, what was it about Parsons that was so different from your other education that you liked so much and that, drove you to pay attention and to really engage in the education?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Parsons, I think of as like an elevated trade school. And, it didn't feel like school. It wasn't, academic and formal. It was interactive and active. I'm sitting there engaging with my brain and my hands, and I didn't realize that was something that I was interested in until I got in there. And I continued my education actually at Montclair State, and I got into doing fine art and printmaking over there. And if I had thought about it at the time, I would have also included a teaching degree, because I love the idea of teaching in public schools, but because I didn't do that at that time, I didn't have the certification. And so I'm really teaching in private schools, which is great, but I love a public school environment, and the idea of going back to school right now to do all that is not that appealing, unless they wanted to give me a boatload of money, and then I'd do it. So.
Speaking of a boatload of money,
Yeah.
When people hear art school, especially parents, are like, no, like waste of money, waste of time. What did you get out of going to art school? Would you do it again, or would you get a different degree?
In a heartbeat, I would go again. I completely found my identity there. And, I didn't know that it was going to lead to anything, and I don't know if what I do is, what every parent's, vision is for their child. But I live a great life. And, I wake up every day happy and excited to do what I do and to share how I do it with other people. So, it afforded me that. It afforded me, real joy and something that I could pass on to my kids, that experience of being an artist. So it's been good.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Sandra Charlap. I've actually known you guys for a long time. I grew up across the street from you, and I went to your dance school for like 5 years when I was way younger. So thank you guys so much for coming. You guys are kind of icons in my life. So yeah, just give a brief introduction about yourselves
little
first.
Speeches. Can you hear me all right? I'm Nancy. I am currently the chair of the dance department at Marymount Manhattan College, but I taught for 25 years at Montclair State University.
Montclair State.
The dance department there. Very familiar with the program. I started dancing, as did we all, right? At really little. It became a passion pretty early in my life. I went on to dance with the regional ballet company in high school and then went to college for dance, which is not, in my day, was not the usual path. In your, it's now much more common. There are many more dance programs and they're really terrific. And then I had a professional career in New York for about 15 years in the high-paying world of serious modern dance. As you know, that's a real high-paying world. And the whole time, as the first gentleman was saying, if you're going to go into the arts, you need to be thinking in a much broader perspective about what that is and what you do with it, which is so much better in terms of the education now than when I was in college for dance, where it was just dance and nothing else. You didn't talk about anything else. But our students at Montclair, at Marymount, they talk about entrepreneurship, they talk about business. Dance is you have a short window with which to have a career. The kicking up your legs part of your career. And we want our dancers to think about having an entire career in dance. So what does that mean? And how are you thinking about dance as an art form? And what other aspects of that are you interested in? And we hope that we educate our students to begin to think about a long career in dance as opposed to just the part where you're kicking up your legs. I'm also on the board of a foundation, the O'Donnell Green Music and Dance Foundation. We fund composer, choreographer collaborations. Very specifically, we were talking about Andrea Miller. She just went to see her. We funded them. We funded New York City Ballet, lots of different artists in New York. And our foundation is just for the tri-state area. So we do fund locally. Anybody choreographer? Yeah. So, Dancette.
Hi, everyone.
How'd you pick the name? That's so perfect.
That's a story, right? Do you know the story, Sasha?
No, actually.
Everyone wants to know?
Yeah.
So, believe it or not, I had a dream. I was 14 years old that everyone was calling me Dancette. So, my name is very similar to Dancette. My government name is Annette.
Okay.
So, it just worked out. Yeah. So, my name is Dancette. I have a dance studio here in Maplewood. This is our 16th year. And pretty much, I taught Sasha for 5 years, right? And I actually took over a dance studio, which was Betty White Dance Center. Those that know, she was in business for 54 years. And she was my dance teacher when I was 4. And then went professional at 15 and did a whole 10-year tour. And then she said, look, I'm ready to pass the baton to you. Do you want the dance studio? And I'm like, I don't know. Give me, I don't know, how long when do you need to know? She's like, you have a month. So I'm like, oh, okay. So, I decided to buy her studio, and here I am.
Awesome. So you started your dance, you started professionally dancing at 15. Wow.
What did you do?
Yeah, what did you do?
I'm a tap dancer, so those that know Betty White, she was a rockette. So yeah, I'm a tap dancer, but I do salsa because that's my background. modern, hip-hop, jazz, contemporary, but if I say anything, it would be taps, salsa, jazz. Oh, the tour, I just did a world tour. I was representing the United States.
Awesome. All right, cool.
How fun was that? Not like the serious, high-paying world of modern. No world tours.
Yeah, so you both have been in the industry for a long time, and then you both transitioned to be teachers, right? So I think what I want to know, at least, the first thing that came to my mind is that I've heard so much about like the dance industry, being a dancer. It's like super hard. It's like this harrowing journey of your life. Like, how hard is it? Like, what is it really like to be a dancer as a profession?
Harrowing. Did you find it harrowing? I did not find it harrowing. I found it incredibly inspiring. It's such a joy to use your body to express yourself. I was not good with words. I'm a little better now. So I was very shy. Were you shy as a kid?
I'm still shy.
Yeah. Agreed. So speaking with my body was not something I was uncomfortable with. Speaking with my words was very much more difficult. Harrowing. I don't know. When you're doing something you love every day, I don't think that's harrowing. There are some issues within the dance world that many dancers experience, not all, that could conceivably make that harrowing. There are body image issues that are actually changing. I'm going to say from my perspective, when I was starting out, you had to be rail thin, starve yourself, whatever. It's so different now. Dancers, if you go to any show on Broadway, there are dancers of all sizes and shapes. The kind of dancing that we're doing now, the kind of dancing we're doing at my institution, which used to just have ballet, modern, and jazz, we now have Kathak, which is classical Indian dance, we have Buto, we have salsa, we have Latin jazz, we have a course called Embodied Africanist Aesthetics, which meets 5 days a week, so it's a technique class just like ballet, just like modern. So there's been an enormous shift. We're starting to decolonize the way we think about dance. We're starting to see that it could be for everybody. We always say it's for everybody. Everybody should dance. But that elite world has always been like everybody but you and you and you and you. And that's shifting, I think.
I would agree. I think just seeing the growth of my dancers and seeing them do amazing things is pretty much why I do what I do. Just seeing you do this and inviting me, I'm like, wow, I'm honored. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Dancette, I wanted to ask you, since you're a business owner and like sort of an entrepreneur, I wanted to ask you sort of what is it like to open your own studio? How do you run it? What is it like to be a solo entrepreneur, not, because you work under like a company?
When I was dancing,
yeah. And so what are the challenges and what are the disadvantages of owning your own studio?
I wouldn't say a challenge. I would say a lesson. So every year I'm thinking about the next year. So what I planned for this year, I planned last year. So I think that if you're not organized and you're not planning ahead, because anything can happen, just like COVID did. So we had to adjust immediately.
Yeah.
I immediately went on Zoom. I didn't stop at all. I did my recital at Maple Crest, the gazebo that we did our recital, because I still just, was thinking about the kids and what's next and what to do to grow,
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you guys survived that. You guys, your studio is very iconic.
Thank you.
A lot of studios didn't.
Congratulations. Yeah, so, hold on. So, Nancy, since you teach students mostly at a college level, so I just wanted to ask you, when do you see, how do you know when someone is going to succeed? What do you see in a dancer that makes you know they're going to have a long and successful career?
That's a very interesting question, and I don't think there's one answer.
Right.
Would you?
Yeah.
Because sometimes the student who you think, oh, they're never going to make it, is the one that has what it takes, is the one that never stops working and never stops learning, and someone who comes in with a lot of information ahead of time, beautiful instrument, no, physical issues. They're just kind of, phoning it in, and they're not the ones who get the work.
So what's the biggest difference? Like working hard?
Not just working hard, but dancers audition even differently today than they did. Back in the day, you auditioned, you stood in a line, you didn't say anything. Now they talk to you, they want to know about you, you have to be able to speak about your work, particularly in a company like Galim, I'm going to say. Those dancers are educated. They are all college educated, they can speak, they're collaborative. It depends on the kind of choreography. I suspect Rockettes, they still kind of want them to be the same height, although I think they just lowered the height. Did you hear that? So, wow, new opportunities to be a Rockette. But you still have certain things that you have to be able to do. And I think that that's true in sort of any company that you're going to go to, but there are many more companies and just a broader variety of things that are being done on Broadway. In the Heights, they're doing salsa. They're not doing just strict jazz. There's just a much broader variety. So to sort of choose the one thing, I think that's very hard.
Yeah. Okay. Not a fair question.
Yeah, not
okay.
fair. Take that away.
Let me see. Yeah, so I'm just going to wrap it up with a question about sort of broadly, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to pursue a career in dance? What do they need to think about more long term? Because your dance career where you're dancing, you said, is going to be very short when you're sort of young. So yeah, what advice would you give us as both people who have had a pretty long dance career?
Well, I would definitely, I do recommend college for dance, not just because I run a program, but that too. But also a program that has an educational component, not just a conservatory. There are wonderful things about a conservatory, but I think in terms of the length of your career, if you're getting a liberal arts education in addition to that, it just sort of expands the way you think about the art form. At our institution, we have concentrations in body science motion where students can do a bio minor and get all the prereqs to go on for PT. They go off and dance for 4 or 5 years, but they can go right back to school and get that PT degree. Same thing, psych for dance therapy. So a place where they can begin to dip their toes in dance-related subject matter or different ways of approaching the rest of their career. Sorry, I'm getting that.
I would say never stop, never quit. There's always something to learn. And if you don't make it out to Broadway or on tour for artists or whatever you want to do, definitely seek a business. Go to school for business so you can run a dance studio, nonprofit. It's just broad. You can do so much.
Yeah. So basically, give yourself options.
Yes. Yes.
Great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having us.
Nancy and Dancette. Thank you so much, guys.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lisa Cohen. I am currently the executive creative manager at McGraw-Hill for higher education and marketing. Ooh. So what I do is produce a lot of content, whether it's print or digital, if it's for social media, if it's videos, brochures, I mean the gamut. So I run a team of creative people in the production of high volume content for marketing purposes. So that's where I am today. But
Awesome.
my path in getting here.
Yeah, how did you start?
Yeah, you don't just land there. So it's a journey. So, it's funny. A lot of the other panelists said what I did is I studied a thing and I got really good at that thing, and then it takes you different places. Well, what I did is my background's video production. So I studied some video production. I also was a volunteer at the radio station, so I was kind of in the AV crew, audio-visual stuff, and I knew that that's what I liked, and so I ended up getting my first job producing educational videos for the College of Engineering at the University of Michigan. And then I just kept following whatever I was interested in, and so I ended up going to New York City, a brief stint at B&H Photo. And then I ended up going to NYU and I studied interactive telecommunications. And the reason why I did that was because when I was at the University of Michigan producing educational videos, it was for off-campus students, and this was 1996. So how do you communicate and have an online class in 1996? It was pretty much, well, it was actually 1993 when I started. It was just at the dawn of the internet. So we used PictureTel, a video conferencing technology. It cost $1 billion. We had a whole room to house the technology for it. And we had students that were dialing in, and we could see them on a monitor in the back of the classroom. And so a teacher, we had these multimedia classrooms, and we called it multimedia then, and someone could raise a hand and in the classroom or on the TV monitor, and the teacher could communicate that way, and our students were in Luxembourg and Mexico, and so if you couldn't dial in that way, then we'd send you videotapes, VHS tapes. So every time the class started, we'd pop in 10 tapes and get them all recording. So, but I was fascinated about how communications were using, technology and communications and design and production and all of that. I knew that was exciting. DVD-ROMs were new. I was all excited about that. So when I went to New York, I went to a program to learn more about that, and it was called Interactive Telecommunications Program. And that's when I started to learn a little bit more about design, or that I didn't know anything about design. When I graduated, I went on to Bloomberg, and I worked in their creative services department. I thought I was going to be hired to do interactive design for Bloomberg, but I ended up doing more than that. So from websites and evites, I was in employee communications, I was in the creative services team, and then marketing, digital marketing, eventually, so I did a lot of different things. Along the way, I did a lot of digital signage stuff, and I was interested in communications too. So I ended up becoming a consultant. I left Bloomberg to be a consultant in communications and design. And then I put it all together. Somehow I was able to wrap up all these different interests in a bow and become a creative manager, where I work with people who are doing a little bit of all of these things, because I'm more of a generalist. Everybody else here seems like they're so specialized in a thing, and I just followed my interest like a butterfly. And I just went and followed my interest, and eventually, I was able to put it all together. So I'm grateful for that.
Well, it sounds like you landed some good gigs along the way. So wait, I had two questions. Now they're mixing together in my mind. So did you study film and video before you went to study telecommunications?
Good question. So I went to the University of Michigan, and I studied sociology and communications. But my passion was at the campus radio station. I was there all the time. I did a DJ slot every hour of the 24-hour spectrum in my as I volunteered there. and I learned a lot about production. And then I became AV. I did microphones and slideshows for professors at the University of Michigan as well. And that's when I started learning about shooting. So in order to give me the leg up, I actually went to a little production program. It was like a 9-month program in video production, and it was pre-digital. So it was a different world, and that's one bit of advice, is always stay on top of the technologies, because things are changing. And so you got to always know what's next.
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about technology with the video people, but you also engage a lot with technology, and how has that shaped the way your career has gone? Because you were talking earlier about the multimedia classroom, and that's really like what people are doing over Zoom these days. So like, how has that directed your path, and how have you changed to, fit into that?
I don't think it directed my path so much, but it did inspire me. I love learning about new technologies and using them to effect. So I got deep into digital signage for a while, and I was working in Times Square on some large signage projects there, the Morgan Stanley building in particular, where we took real-time data and we were able to visualize it. So if like the market was going up, you would see animations that were going up, or if we were talking about the commodity of gold, you would see gold pouring into a certain amount. So I got interested in using technology to do design.
Awesome.
And so it's always been that way.
Yeah. I mean, they kind of go hand in hand. So what would you say was the benefit of studying telecommunications and communications? And did you say marketing? Or
I never did study marketing,
Okay.
but I ended up in the marketing world.
Yeah.
But I'm always on the content side, the design side, because there's also another side of marketing, which is analytics. And those people are
not
always
as
looking
fun
at your
side.
numbers and like looking to see how many clicks you got and how many people are going to your website. But guess what? You change the color of your button, you change the position of where your video is on your website, and you might attract new people, because people only scroll down, X amount. So you got to understand the analytics to know how to make more effective design. But I'm always on the production side.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. So you work mostly, you have been working under companies like McGraw-Hill and Bloomberg. So how is like the bureaucracy there?
I was a sociology
how do you
undergrad.
deal with
I
that?
never thought in a million years I'd work for a big company.
Yeah.
I was like, that is just death. Like, you're all going to be cattle, and it's like horrible. And to tell you the truth, I think it's improved. Just like as dance is becoming more open to different body types and different types of people, I think companies are more open to like coming as you are. So in the beginning, when I first started, I was totally in culture shock. I was just out of art school, and now I'm at Bloomberg, and I'm like, am I supposed to like have a Lisa at work and the real Lisa at home, and keep these two worlds really separate? And I tried doing that, and it was not great. I didn't love it, but over time, I was able to become more myself at work and not have to like have this complete separation. And nowadays, I think it's even encouraged just to be who you are. You don't have to have two different wardrobes or act a different way so much. I think you can blend the worlds more. So I don't think it's bad. I loved working for a big company, because so when I got to Bloomberg, I didn't have the first job that I wanted there. So I thought I was interviewing for an interactive designer position, and they put me in customer support. And I was like, I'm just out of grad school for design. What am I doing here? And they're like, this is our program. If you want to start at Bloomberg, everybody starts here to learn about the company. And so some of my friends are like, you should quit. This is like ridiculous. Why would you do that? And I'm like, well, I could see potential here. There's like a lot of opportunity. And they say after so many months, I could move on and do a different job. And in so many months, I interviewed for the television side of Bloomberg. And they only wanted me to like be an operator, like press a button or something. And I was like, this is I really wasn't interested in going in the it didn't seem exciting to me for some reason. I didn't interview for the right job in TV. But then a job opened up in creative services, and I'm like, that's for me. And I moved, and I was able to stay at Bloomberg for 13 years. And I thought of it as a playground. It's a big company. You can move around. You don't have to quit because you don't love your job. You can look around in the company and become even more valuable and really enjoy it. I know it nowadays everybody says you should move on every 3 years, you need to go find a new job. You know, I don't think that's necessarily the case. If you find a great company, dig in, move around, and have some fun.
That's really good advice, because I always think of, you know, big corporations as being sort of static. You can't like move around, you can't be so creative as you would in, I don't know, like a startup business or something like that. But yeah.
I don't think so. I think they like people who are critical thinkers and have ideas. You know, there's all kinds of employees they need. They do need people who are just going to be the worker bee, but they also need leaders. You will make a great leader. She already is a great leader.
Thank you. So I think I just have one last question. Would you say having skills in multiple locations, in video and AV and other stuff, before you went into your career that you have now, would you say that's helped you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, everything you do in life is a stepping stone to the next thing you do, whether it's a paid gig or not. So, all of these events that you're producing is going to help you later on in some way. I had no idea when I was, I had no idea when I worked at B&H Photo that would help me get a full ride scholarship to NYU.
What?
It
How
actually
does that
did.
happen?
Well, I was selling nonlinear video editing systems, and it was the year that FireWire came out, and everything was changing in video to digital. It was a digital revolution with video. And I applied to NYU, and when I got accepted, they wanted to build out a new video lab, and they needed someone to build it and run it. And so they knew that I was building systems every day at B&H. So they're like, why don't you come? And I got a full ride. So you never know what thing you do.
Yeah.
You never know what you do, where it's going to lead you to. You might think you're in some kind of bum position, or you might just be volunteering, but these things add up. And just follow your interests, and you will be successful. That would be my advice.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Lisa Cohen.
My name is Anthony Artis. I am a freelance videographer, also teach at NYU Film School and write film books and teach on LinkedIn Learning.
I started as a documentary filmmaker and then sort of moved into focusing on camera work, being a director of photography, cameraman, camera operator, that type of thing. That's what I do. That's how I make a living.
Yeah, so actually Lisa was talking about getting into being a radio DJ in college, and you mentioned that the same thing led you to become a videographer. So I just thought that was interesting. Yeah. Radio's dead. So what I was talking to Lisa about, that she brought up that was really interesting to me, that I wanted to ask you guys is, since you work so closely with tech, basically all with tech now, I know you originally vowed to only shoot film, and that didn't work out. So, since you work so closely with tech, how has it changed the industry since you entered it, and how do you keep up with that?
Well, this is one industry where you absolutely have to keep up with the tech. And the good thing about it is, if you fall behind, don't worry, something new is going to come along, you jump on the next one, and you'll be right back in the game again. So whatever's hot today, trust me, will not be hot tomorrow. I think the biggest thing is really, I have a big advantage in that I work with young people and at a film school, so they bring me, like whatever's new is happening, I'm going to find out in that classroom before it's said and done. They're going to be talking about it, they're going to be doing it, and that helps me stay informed. So I have a little bit of an edge in that being in an educational environment, I naturally am exposed to more newer stuff, but you absolutely have to stay on top of the technology. But fortunately, you guys have something we never had, and Lisa's jealous of this too, I'm sure, YouTube. There was no, you know what you had to do to learn filmmaking? When I was coming up, there was no, you couldn't just push a button and somebody give you the answer. You had to find a book and then find people, and it was more complicated.
Yeah, what you call the barrier to entry has just sunk so low. In other words, when I was starting out, you had to learn, and you couldn't learn on YouTube because there was no YouTube. So you had to either go to school or you had to kind of apprentice yourself to somebody, which would take a long time. If you wanted to rent equipment, it was extremely expensive. If you wanted to buy equipment, it was pretty much impossible. Nowadays, you can make a movie on your iPhone. You can learn anything you want online. Even though Sasha can rely on me. Guillermo, could you just turn the sound down a little bit, please? Thanks. Even though Sasha asks me questions about technical things that she needs answers for, she's taught herself everything. I mean, she's taught herself all this audio equipment, music equipment, video equipment, editing, and I'm sure YouTube played a part in that, as well as just fooling around and reading tutorials and stuff.
YouTube has all the answers.
Pretty much anything short of brain surgery, I think you can learn on YouTube. And there's probably the brain surgery channel by now, I don't know. But what Anthony said about young people, when you get to be my age, many people who have been very successful get stuck. And that's just, that's true of anybody as you get older. But if you're not in contact with young people who are just sponges and they'll just soak up every little new thing and they obsess about learning everything. If you're not in touch with them, you're just going to become a dinosaur, basically. So I've always had an assistant who's, just sort of college age or just out of college, and that's helped a lot. The problem is, as there are more and more young people out there who have talent and have access to all this equipment, the competition gets more stiff and the pay gets much lower. So if you don't want to work for nothing, you have to be really, really good so that you can stay ahead of those bright young whippersnappers who may be as good as you, actually, but you'll get hired because you are more dependable, more experienced, more presentable to clients and that kind of thing.
They're not as good as us.
Okay, that'll be just between you and me and the universe. So anyway, that's the answer, Sasha.
Yeah, what I find interesting about industries that work so closely with technology is that as, like also with music, I've found that with the rise of like home studios, like me myself, I just have like a microphone and like a Scarlett, and like I just make music in my room. And with like making movies on your iPhone, I know like so many people have gotten super famous and successful with very little equipment. So I think sometimes that it might dilute the quality of what comes out because so many people have access and the ability to make whatever they want. But how would you say you like find your niche in what you do, and how would you determine how to be successful and not get lost in the oversaturation of media that's coming out?
Well, it's a trick one. I think the key to a lot of this with creatives, I think just doing something you love. If you can't do something you love for whatever reason, then hopefully you're making a lot of money at it because you're otherwise going to be a little bit miserable. But I think the key is really finding work that you enjoy. I do, in terms of my actual work for video, it's mostly corporate documentary. But that takes me into all kinds of places. I'm a person that gets bored very easily, but this work I find still exciting. I've been doing it 20 plus years now, and I still never get bored. I was just 2 days ago, I'm in a tank factory. Like I'm in a place where they're actually putting together tanks, and I'm learning about this world, and I've been in NASA, and I've been behind the scenes for a sporting event, so I get to see and learn these things that I find interesting and encouraging. So I say whatever field you go into to be successful, you should be interested in your work. And if you actually find joy and fun in it, what you'll discover, as some of us hopefully here have discovered, is that it's not work at all. Most of the days I have a shoot, my eyes pop open and I'm excited. I never wake up like, oh man, I got to go shoot that today. When I start feeling that, that's when I know I need to go back to the other stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Do you have anything to say?
Well, I would say being good at what you do is important and necessary, but I have 5 words that I say to my daughters pretty much every single day, and that is, it's all who you know. And you could hear that and you could say, oh, well, so you need to have a very well-connected family, or you need to kind of be born into all these connections. No, nobody's born knowing people. But each person, just like Lisa connected with some people at B&H of all places, and it led to a whole career. It's all who you know, it really is. If I look back on my career, I've never sent a resume in to get a job and gotten a job. Never, ever. I haven't printed a resume in 20 years. Nobody's ever asked me for my diploma. I spent a semester in grad school. What it gave me was a few little tips and people to know. I had a mentor in college who set me in a very interesting set of directions. And then I had an executive producer at PBS who I did some arts work for. And if I created a family tree of all the work I've had in, I'm going to embarrass myself now, but 35 years, most of it goes back to this one guy. And I just texted with him the other day. I've been into NASA too with him. That's a highlight, right? I knew him, I know him, and the rest is gravy. So I learned this the hard way because I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker, and I thought I was very awesome or whatever, and I made a film that did very, very well, and it's actually in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art, believe it or not. But, thank you. But after that, I thought, oh, I made something good. It won a bunch of awards. I'm set. Okay, give me the next assignment. And I spent 2 years sending out grant applications. And I have about 60 grant applications in a folder at home, and the letters that go with them that say, thank you very much, this is a great project, but we're not going to help you. I didn't know the people I was asking the money for. I didn't know people who had money. I didn't know people who could connect me with people who could okay my project. I learned the hard way. I got extremely depressed because I was offered a corporate job for an enormous amount of money, and I had to decide to give up that path that I'd been knocking my head against a wall for 5 years. I got over it, I did the corporate work, and basically decided I wasn't going to be a filmmaker per se. I was going to help make films in various ways. So I learned the hard way. I tell them every day, it seems to be working out for them, so, you know. I just can't emphasize that enough. It's a cliche, and when you're young, you don't want to hear it. But get to know people, talk to people, ask people for favors, and be nice to every single person you encounter, wherever they are.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
just want to say, I know we got to wrap up time, but that is 100% true in terms of it's all who you know. It's a business. It's really about relationships at the end of the day. So your reputation is probably the single most valuable thing you have, is what I tell film students. You will win or lose jobs. Like, I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars will transact hands from just somebody giving somebody the thumbs up or saying, hey, I work with that person. That's all it takes. I've gotten jobs where I've gotten paid very well just from one person saying, Ant's cool, I trust Ant. And so you got to guard that. That is how you get a job before you ever even walk in the room, many times, I find.
And just one little thing to add to that. It's not enough to know people, although some people get ahead that way, but you have to do your very best on every single thing you do. Even if it seems over the top, you're under-promising and way over-delivering. You don't want to drive yourself crazy, but you do not want to like say, okay, well, that's good enough, blah, blah, blah. You have to be excellent.
Yeah, you literally brought like 8 cases to this just to film with 2 cameras. Thank you.
It's a habit.
I just have a few more questions. So, speaking of, it's like knowing people, what are people in the film industry like, and what types of people have you encountered? And what would you say is good to know when you're interacting with people, meeting new people? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a good question. Film people, I would say, very serious, very strong work ethic. If you're somebody that doesn't want to work hard or doesn't like long hours, just stay away from this. Because one of the things they don't tell you is that in actual filmmaking nowadays, it's not unusual. In Hollywood, people working 50, 60-hour weeks are common. That's like the standard, and I don't know how OSHA doesn't enforce any of that, but it's been that way for a long time. So I would say in terms of personality, just really, you know, they say if you're, if you're late, you can't be late at all, but if you're on time, you're late, and if you're early, you're on time, that kind of a thing. So it's really being prepared, and really just a lot of it, as I tell people, has to do with personality. When you're working these 10 and 12-hour days, nobody wants to be with somebody that they don't want to be with for that long, especially when you're working on an intense project and under pressure. So personality comes into play, people that can handle pressure. Sometimes, you know, you got a producer that's yelling at you or something, and you got to ride that out and just, you know, be a professional at all times. So I would say being professional, being serious, being on time, and then once you prove yourself, then things kind of relax a little bit and it's a little more of an environment. But in the beginning, I would say watch your P's and Q's on any set you're on. And people don't realize it. You're always being watched. I don't care if you're a PA or whatever, you're getting your promotion while you're doing the job before. Somebody's watching how you conduct that job, and they've already made up their mind that on this next gig, I'm going to bump them up. But if you approach it such that, well, I'm just a PA, I'm going to wait until I get the real job, people sense that. So I would say your work ethic at all levels, whether you're the very bottom or the very top, matters the most.
One of my other little sayings is, the pain is temporary, but the film lasts forever. And whether that's the pain on your shoulder from carrying the camera, the pain from dealing with a really impossible client, the pain of the long hours, the pain of sitting and editing on a deadline even though you really need to sleep, that goes away. The film stays there forever, and what you put into it is there forever.
Yeah, I have to say, I've been working as a PA for you for the past year, and that's true. They're always watching you. Like, he's always watching me. I think I just have one more question. I have two more questions. So, I've heard a lot of people, how do I say this? A lot of people go to film school because they like to watch movies. So, how important would you say, if you want to be a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, anything in that area, how important would you say film school is to actually get into the field?
He has a conflict of interest on this.
Let me be clear. You absolutely do not need to go to film school to become a filmmaker, especially not now in this day and age. That doesn't mean that it's not a very wise idea for you to go to film school to learn, but you can learn filmmaking entirely outside of film school if you were to, I think of friends, the model I always say, if you were to make your own feature film, you would get the equivalent of like a full undergrad film school education in terms of if you actually put that money into it. However, there are many advantages, I think, to getting a film school education, specifically when it comes to who you know. Yeah. At the end of the day, when you graduate film school, everybody fans out in all different directions in Hollywood, New York, and everywhere, and those become, you know, your entree. A lot of the people that I know from NYU, as I've seen now, many classes graduate, they're all working together. Like 10 years after graduation, there's the same group of kids. So you do form these relationships as you're, you know, making your bones in film school, but it's not necessary to learn, but it's not necessarily a bad idea. If you're going to learn on your own, I would say you got to be the kind of person that's really got some follow through, and, you know, some people benefit more from having that guidance. If you need that guidance, then by all means go to film school. Also, a big thing you get out of film school that I forgot about is people critiquing your work. It's one thing when you're sitting alone in the basement, but when you got a class of 20 smart people studying the same thing, I've gotten problems that have stuck in my head for 3 weeks and had somebody in 1 minute in class say, why don't you do this? And I'm like, oh my God, like, thank goodness I went to film school. That's my take.
So more of the people, the perspective, and the connections, you would say.
Yeah, relationships.
Yeah.
You get formal.
Yeah, yeah.
Or whatever, but it's not necessary. Half of the people I work with, probably more than half, never went to film school, and many of them are just as good, if not better, than the people that did. So that doesn't. It's a harder path to get into, and it's very expensive, by the way. Very expensive to go to a good film school.
Yeah,
so
that's
you
the
want to weigh it,
problem.
but I'm happy I did. I don't regret it, but I got lots of friends that didn't. You can go either way.
Let's hear from the film school dropout.
Okay. I learned some filmmaking in undergrad, even though there wasn't really a film program. And so basically I said, well, what's the best film school in the world? And it was USC and NYU, basically. So I said, oh, so I'm going to go to one of those. So I applied to NYU, graduate. I'd already finished my undergrad. Got in, moved to New York from Philadelphia. by day 2, I said, I got to get out of here. I hate this. Now, this was a long time ago, so the NYU grad program might be much better now, but it pretty much sucked. And it was, no, I don't want to say that. It was not for me. There were, most of the people there wanted to go into television, into Hollywood, into that kind of thing, and I wanted to make documentaries. And it just wasn't the right thing for me, so I dropped out after a semester. And basically, as far as going to film school, it's your personality and how much guidance you need, but then it's also the cost-benefit analysis. If you've got parents who can pay for your film school, which, how much would it cost now?
Over $100,000 a year.
If you, well, that's including living like in New York or something, right? Yeah.
I think so.
It's a lot of money, and you will not make that money back quickly, if ever, in film. You would have to be, you'd have to be a top director or really top director of photography, editor, something like that, to make that money back within your lifetime, basically. So if you have the money, and you're the type of person who needs that structure and guidance, then by all means go. There are a lot of benefits. But it's not really worth it if you don't. Do not get into debt. Do not, listen to me, do not get into debt.
There are a lot of now, they didn't exist before, but there are tons of filmmaking training programs outside of film school. Just programs of women in film. There's DCTV, like there's tons of other ways that you can learn that aren't necessarily as expensive or as time commitment involved. So look into some of those programs as well.
Yeah, thank you. Just one more question for Anthony. How was it to write a book about your experience, and how, I don't know, it's hard to write a book.
How
does that work?
Actually. Well, my book is a nonfiction book. My book is for aspiring filmmakers. It's called the Shut Up and Shoot Documentary Guide. Also have the Shut Up and Shoot Freelance Video Guide. But it wasn't hard, actually. I didn't intend to write a book. I'm a teacher, so I was making materials for my class, and my handout grew from 10 pages to 16 to 30 pages. And then I'm like, 30 pages, that's a chapter. And then I just kept writing more handouts for class, and then that turned into a book and went on to other stuff. But a book is not, to me, it's not hard at all. Just start writing one page at a time. It's something, just on a side note, because you brought that up, it changed my career and it changed my life. I wrote the book really just trying to help other filmmakers, but I had no clue what a book could and would do for you. And I'll recommend a book for anybody out there that is trying to do something to get recognition. There's a book called How to Become a Recognized Authority in Your Field in 60 Days or Less by a guy named Robert Bly. Yes, totally corny title. I did what that book said, and I had a book deal in less than 3 months after I did what that book said. So there is a value in terms of just self-promotion. Self-promotion has helped me a lot in terms of getting out there. So that book helped a lot of people, but more it helped me get recognition and credibility, and it led me to teaching and other things beyond that. So just write one page at a time. If you got an idea, you never know. And I didn't know, by the way, how it was going to be received. It became a bestseller, and it's used in a lot of film schools around the world, but I almost didn't write it. So if you got an idea, put it out there and let the universe decide.
Awesome. Congratulations, by the way. All right, thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you for your input and teaching us.
I'll just briefly go through my journey because it'll kind of explain what I do. I went to undergrad for psychology at Colgate. I played lacrosse there, which will become relevant later. So, I was a D1 athlete, took myself very seriously. Came out of college, worked in advertising, was not for me. Got into marketing, did marketing for 15 years. Worked in the city, had a corporate job. And then I had my first child, who is now 18 and just dropped her at college. And I started taking pictures of her because I was afraid I was going to miss every single moment. And then I started realizing that these pictures really sucked. Like, they were out of focus. Like, I had the vision in my head for what I wanted them to look like, but I couldn't make it happen. So I started taking classes. between 2004 and 2010, took a lot of classes. I never went to photography school. I never went to art school. I don't consider myself an artist. I don't consider myself creative. I like Excel. So I just took pictures all the time. I would go to my kids' friends' birthday parties and I would take pictures. And then one day someone offered to pay me money to take pictures. And I was like, oh, I guess, okay, I could do that. And then after I did that, I was like, yeah, I definitely can do this. And then I just started doing it and started getting paid. So started out in kids and families, decided I hate kids and families. Mostly it's the parents that I hate. The kids are annoying, but the parents are worse. But actually the real reason I stopped doing that was because it was a lot of weekend work. And so sometimes you make creative decisions along your way, and sometimes you make logistics decisions. So I'm married, I have kids, and my husband worked a lot of hours, and I was working all the weekends, so we never saw each other. So I made a logistical decision to switch what I was doing to shoot things I could do during the week. So corporate headshots or actor headshots. And then anytime I got like uninspired or I just felt like my work sucked or something, I would find some buff guy at the gym and I would do a fitness shoot. And then after doing that for a little while, I was like, this is a thing. Why don't I do that? So I got in touch with a modeling agency that does fitness, and they started sending me all their fitness models that needed portfolio work. So I would do this kind of stuff and all kinds of stuff to help them build their portfolios. So I kind of got known for doing fitness, athletes, very sort of aggressive types of things. And this again goes back to the athlete thing. I love being around athletes. Like, I still have the athletic mentality. I don't have the body that can execute anymore. I can't play sports. I can't run. There's a lot of people who are my age who now are running marathons. My body's shot. I can't do it. So being around athletes is so fun and exciting to me, which also leads me to one other thing I do, which maybe some of you've seen.
Yeah.
So this is, it's actually my daughter.
Oh, that was your daughter.
Anyway, so this is just one of the things that I do, and this is just one of the things that I do, and I only just brought it because, again, they're around town a lot, and we're actually starting to shoot the next season of Athletes. Just to encapsulate, started out in marketing, undergrad in psychology. It all helped me and continues to help me with what I'm doing now. So I know you're going to ask questions, but I will say one thing that is just a piece of advice, which is I think that while you should study your craft, I very, very much think people should study business, study marketing, study accounting. You don't have to study accounting, just do it, just learn it, just so that you understand. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to have to run the books, you're going to have to get paid, you're going to have to do all this stuff, and all these things teach you how to manage a business. So you may end up working for somebody, but you might end up running your own business, and if you do, all the things that you learn in business, this is so important that these guys all said before. Show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, deliver on time, be professional. And I've always said I don't think I'm the best photographer there is, but I know that it is easy to work with me and people like me. And it's because I do what I say I'm going to do. I show up when I say I'm going to do it. I'm reliable. I'm consistent. And these are all just things that, like, it's part of the reason why I think I don't like to say I'm a creative, because creatives have a bad reputation for being very flaky. And I just do not consider myself flaky. So that would just be my one piece of advice, is just like, whatever you do, make sure that you have a very firm business basis if you end up needing to run your own business. I've seen so many creatives be like, I don't know how to do it. And then they like fail because they don't market, or they don't, whatever it is. So I think just, yes, learn your craft, but learn business as well, I think.
That was actually going to be my first question.
Oh, yeah, how about that?
How did your experience in business and marketing, affect what you do as a photographer? And another one that's sort of in together with that is, how did you transition from working a corporate job to just being a photographer as your
Yeah.
job?
So when I was I worked in marketing. I was the director of marketing for a recruitment agency in the city. And I got an MBA in marketing and management when I was there. I was doing that at night because I thought I was going to have a marketing career. I was like convinced I was like corporate marketing. I had like financial goals. I had like this. I wanted to do that. And then I got inspired in a way that I had never felt, or at least had not felt in years. I felt inspired when I was in school. I liked being a dork sitting in the front row. Like, I loved school. But I got inspired by the photography, and it just like, oh my God, I have to do this. Like, I have to do this. So it was like just this like feeling that I had to pursue the feeling of being like moved in my soul by something, right? And then, I have to really say that like I was able to do it because I had a husband that could financially support the family, and I could just quit and then build up my business. Many people do not have that luxury, and it is a luxury. And now I have a kid in private school, so I am now morphing my business to make sure that it's like, I'm not really about my art. I'm about paying for my kid's school now. It's like, again, it's like you make logistical decisions, right? So my transition was build slowly, and as with all of these guys, it's so fascinating that I'm so enjoying this because all of us thought we were going here, and then we kind of just, we went there, and then you went there, and it's like, and it took me a while to morph the athlete side of me and the mentality that I had with this new exciting photography side. So like, think about all the aspects of yourself and how they all contribute to making you unique and special in your field, right? Like, most of the people that are photographers don't know marketing. And most of the people that are photographers, like when I shoot these athletes, like particularly when I was shooting the special dance, I know good form. So, I have a unique thing that just maybe a photographer, the next guy doesn't, because I, know athletes and I know dance and stuff. So everything that you do kind of contributes to making you special and unique in your field. So it was a easy transition, but there was a lot of paths and like meandering to find like what I really felt good about. And I'm still making shifts now. Like over the last few months, I've made a few shifts in my business too. Some of them have been unfortunate shifts that I've had to make because I think I have arthritis and, so I'm having to think about like, okay, I love it. I love what the dancers were saying about you don't build a dance career, you build a dance life, or whatever it was that you were saying. It's like you don't prep yourself for the 10 years that you can be a dancer. Like, I think about the same way with photography. Like, I'm not going to be able to shoot forever. My hand is not going to function for another 10 years. So I'm building now, I'm thinking strategically about how I can build my business to be things that exist beyond what I can physically do, right? So, I also recommend when you think about your path, like a lot of people say, I want to be a wedding photographer, and you're going to shoot 30 weddings in a month or whatever. You are not going to be able to physically function once you hit 40. Like, you're just not. So you have to be strategic, be well-rounded, and, just make sure that you think about how to build a life that goes beyond just what you can do physically. Because you only have one body, and sometimes they betray you, I just have to say. So.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you. So consider all your options. As many people have said before, I think that's really the most interesting. That's what I was trying to get out of this whole thing, is to like see how different parts of your life and your different talents can, lead you to a career path that you maybe didn't think you would have, but you end up enjoying. So yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, and like one of the things, like, again, like trying to do something that maybe isn't as physically taxing, I've started doing these athlete recruitment highlight reels, right? So it's not exactly photography, it's more video editing and stuff, but it's something that is a big passion of mine. I have athletic kids, I was an athlete, and like I'm so into sports and athletes, and it's, again, something I can maybe do, not that sitting at a desk is any better for your body, but it's just not as taxing. It's taxing in a different way. So trying to learn new skills, like everyone was talking about, like constantly learning. I'm trying to learn new skills because I'm trying to elongate create a longevity of my business. So.
Yeah, so you seem to be really business-minded in terms of your artistic business. So what's like the biggest piece of advice you would give to someone who's trying to start their own business or to go into a field that maybe is really competitive, like photography? What would you say?
One of the things that I think, is so interesting that people always say, stay true to your art and stay true to your art. And I'm like, all right, I get it. But I also think that the client's the client, and you have a job to do, and you don't have to love everything that you do. You have to have a career that's going to last a couple of years. So like you were saying, sometimes you do a gig that you don't really want to do, or you do things that are not, your artistic vision. Is everything exactly the way you want it all the time? No. So my advice would just to be kind of like, follow your artistic vision, but also have the wherewithal to understand that it is a business. So I'm not creating art that people are putting on their walls. And if you do that, then yes, you can do whatever you want, and hopefully people will buy it. I create a product. My product or service really is photography. So I am a business person. I am creating a service. And so that is my interaction with my client. So I show up as a business person and I create that product service. I approach it from that way. And I think that, it doesn't, I don't think, make me less creative. I think it just makes me more reliable, I think. So yeah, just be reliable. Do what you say you're going to do. While you create your art, you create your vision and follow your heart, but also just realize that it's not about you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Yasmeen.
Yeah. Sure. Oh, questions. Hey.
Someone has a question.
Yeah. Getting paid for it? Well, it was like with the film discussion, which is when you want to start doing something, your first clients are your friends, right? So at the time, I was shooting kids and families. Because of that, I worked with my friends' kids, and so you build with the people you know, and you go from there. So once you get a reputation, then the word of mouth will spread. So, I'm not necessarily saying go into an area you're not interested in just to get work, but because it took me a while to figure out that I really liked the sports and athletes. But once I did, the first thing I did when I contacted that fitness agency is I worked for them initially for free, and then I started charging. So I was sort of like, I needed a portfolio, I needed work, I needed something to show. And then I would start charging. So basically you establish free work or low paid work or whatever it is, and then you use that to go after the people that you really want. We don't like it as professional photographers that people are doing the work for free. But we all understand that we all had to start there. And in theory, my stuff should be better than someone's doing it for free because they're just learning. And I hope the client understands that. But yeah, so just do the work that you want to do, connect with those people, do it for free or lower, and then use that work, that portfolio, to market yourself. Market, again, get in front of the people, network, make contacts with the people that you want to be working for with the portfolio that you've built already. If anyone wants to add, yeah.
What's your take on iPhone cameras versus camera cameras?
iPhone
iPhone cameras, which is funny because everyone's like, oh, can you take a picture because you're a photographer? I'm like, yeah, but not with this. Like, I'm not, I mean, I can get a good angle, but my daughter thinks my angles suck because I'm not an Instagram photographer, and apparently those angles are different. But anyway.
They are really different.
Yeah, so like, I'm like, why is there all that space at the top? It just, I don't know. So, yeah, so there are actually people who have very big careers off of being iPhone photographers, and the cameras are really, really good. And there are also a lot of little add-on lenses that you can get that you can do a lot of things. I don't know much about it, but yeah, I think like, you know, a lot of photographers, I would say most photographers will say it's not about the equipment. A lot of people will say that it's not about the equipment, but like, just in general, like, it really is just about what you do with it. So whether it's an iPhone or, you know, you get some used camera or whatever, people will recognize good work even if it's not the highest amount of pixels or whatever. And there's plenty of like super like famous people who shoot with like 5-year-old cameras, 10-year-olds. They don't shoot with like the big 45 megapixel cameras. Like, so, I mean, I think if your technique is good and you're doing kind of cool stuff, it really doesn't matter what you're shooting with, personally.
Yeah, you have to close the gap between the instrument and the talent of the person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, definitely a good camera can do great things, but you can also shoot really crappy stuff with a good camera.
Yeah.
So.
I know, I've done it before.
I think we all started that way. Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
Good. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yes.
So I know you talked about like your athletic history.
Yes.
Like the mindset and all these things is different from creative. Do you feel like you had trouble mending those things when you mentioned the field you were in? Like you were surrounded by people that are more creative or artistic?
Yeah. Yes. No, I mean, there's like, yeah. No, I mean, no, because when I first got into it, I wasn't really, I wasn't working within the, also I had gone into corporate first. So I had already sort of like tamped my intensity down a little bit to be able to like exist in the corporate world. But I was a manager, because like I had always been like the captain of all my teams that I was on, and I was the, you know, whatever. So I was like, I like to boss people around. So when I was in corporate, I was the manager of the team, whatever. So then I go out on my own. I got no one to boss around. It's just me. And I'm like, now I'm really going crazy. So like, I had to like, yeah, this is why I wanted to shoot athletes. Because I was like, I can't, what am I going to do? Like compete with moms at pickup? Like, what am I going to do? I have nowhere to compete. And I did karate for a while, but even that was just like, you know, I'm getting a little out of control there. So I need to like calm it down a little bit. And yeah, I think I just kind of found a way to use it, right? Like to my strengths. And I think people, I don't know, they are amused by me because I am a little intense, and people kind of, I don't know, they pick up off on the energy and they like it. And so even in the corporate world, they like when people are, you know, really kind of, I don't know, people very often will hire athletes in the corporate world because they want people who are sort of like, you know, goal-oriented, like do what it takes to get there. So, yeah, I think it just kind of informs how I conduct my life, and being around athletes is just a bonus, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'm Stephane Wrembel. I'm a guitar player, composer. I compose for films, I organize festivals. I do a bunch of things like that, all music related, and I study philosophy.
Rich Eisenstein, piano player, also composer, although it's been a while since I've really composed music, but used to do it for film a bit, and educator and all that stuff. Anyway.
Hi, I'm Frank Guastella. I am a music producer, musician, a sound engineer, a videographer, and a biology teacher at South Orange Middle School.
That's how we met when I was in 7th grade. Yeah. The coolest teacher. All right. So, yeah, you guys are all from pretty different backgrounds. So how did you get into music and start your music careers and all that?
Well, I'm a human being, so I'm a musician. Because that's how we live as human beings. We always had music with us, you know? So there's two parts in music, is music itself as an archetype. It's a thing that exists by itself, and we try to understand its structure, how it works itself. And there is also us, like as human beings, using it to express like who we are, our group, what we experience. So I just think it's a natural thing for a human being, you know? It happens that in our modern world, which is structured around logic and a certain society, you know, you have to like put things in boxes, you know? But I was always allergic to that, so I just followed my nature and just decided to be a musician. And I don't know, just not question it, just do it.
So on a more micro level, in my family, music was kind of sacrosanct. And so even though my parents were not musicians, they loved music, and we didn't have a TV or a car for a long time, struggled, but we always had a record player, you know, the flat discs you spin around. And so my brother and I both became musicians. He became a really successful classical musician. I became a jazz musician, and like Stephane said, you know, music's in us all. So if you've got some talent and you work at it, well, there you go.
Yeah, like everybody said up here, I think I started playing an instrument at a really young age. Piano was my first instrument, and I guess it became just more of I felt happiest playing music, and it was something that always kind of spoke to me in a very spiritual way. It's something that I never thought about really making money with, which I feel like may have been part of the basic strategy to get me to where I am, is that I'm not really focused on any of the monetary aspects of it at first. It's just something that, regardless of how much money I can make or I don't make, I always found myself playing music. And so I started playing piano at a young age and joined a band and was touring, and then eventually became a teacher, essentially because I was touring with my band and I had summers off as a teacher, and I felt like I could kind of balance these two things for the time being, not thinking that I'd be entering my 19th year as a teacher and still balancing these things as a creative. But I then started making some money with music for films or commercials, and opened up a studio, recording studio, and then started filming videos for some of the artists that I was producing for, just because I was always waiting for people to make music videos, and I felt like the layers of music kind of transpired into the layers of video pretty seamlessly. And that became a passion of mine, and started shooting music videos and documentaries and things like that. And I feel like, yeah, just like everybody, I feel like the common thread to all the creatives in here is it was more a circuitous route, not like I had a skill and I wanted to be good at it. It was something that I felt like there were a lot of things in my personality that I wanted to continue to feed, which was just feeling creative and alive and things that spoke to my soul. And you know, and it's led me to a career where I feel like I'm happy with the things I produce, and you know, just being a creative is something that keeps me kind of going and alive with all of the things that I do in life.
So, seeing as you are all seem more attached to the heart and soul aspect of music, what is the most, you know, emotionally satisfying project that you've worked on, and how did you get to be able to, you know, do something so awesome?
I don't know. It's every day the same, you know? I teach, I compose, I work on my book, I book gigs, I drive and play, whatever. These things happen, you know? So I just do them every day, and I celebrate every day of life, like it should be, you know? It's not like, I don't know, there's not a different day. It's always great, you know? And sometimes it's better, sometimes it doesn't really matter, because in the end, time flies, you know what I mean? So it's best to like enjoy every day and just be a musician. I don't know. That's how I see things. It's more like a general celebration. It's more like a trajectory, a path, rather than a single event. Once again, it's very hard for me to put things in boxes. I really like this one not so much. But I think it's a whole, you know? And it depicts a certain image of your own life, and you are inside yourself and you experience it, you know? Sometimes something very bad happened to you, somehow it's gonna go back in the music or in the way you do something else. It's like that. So it's the trajectory that is transcendental and beautiful and enjoyable. That's my view.
Yeah, it's like that James Taylor song, you know, Secret of Life. Right? Check the lyrics, they're very pithy. But yeah, I mean, that's a good question though about what's the most is that what you said, the most emotionally?
Most emotionally satisfying.
Emotionally satisfying, yeah, and I mean, to Stephane's point, it would be hard to pinpoint one thing, but if I had to, I'd have to say, and actually, Sasha has witnessed this, but I get together to play with a great bass guitarist who's a good buddy of mine who still does a lot of gigs and stuff, and we get together almost every week, and I've had some of the most emotionally satisfying moments in music playing with him, partly because we're just completely open and honest with each other in that musical conversation, and just kind of transcendent when we play. But there've been a lot, and so it is a whole piece, the career of a musician or an artist. But I think if I had to pinpoint one, that would probably be a few times with my buddy Paul. Anyway,
It's the little things.
Yeah, I think personally the most emotionally satisfying place I could be is just in my studio creating things and not worrying about how it's received by anybody else. I'm just kind of in my own zone and just doing things like that. This is emotionally satisfying, this event right now, because I feel like Sasha was a student of mine, and just kind of coming full circle, knowing that as a 7th grader, now as a young adult doing her own creative path, that she would invite me back here, kind of validates some of the connections that I've made over the course of the years, you know, whether it's a teacher or a musician or a videographer or just a creative in general or just a person. I think that's the most emotionally satisfying for me personally, is just kind of having these connections that have lasted certain people's lifetimes, you know.
I should have turned out to be a biologist. I should have been a biologist. Yeah, so I wanted to ask Rich, over the course of your career and as you've like gone into retirement, how have you seen the music industry develop and what has changed the most?
Okay, are we all sleeping here for a couple of weeks? Wow. I mean, we would all have, I would guess that we would all have a different take on that in a way, and yet, and so there's no empirical thing I can give you for that. I can say that obviously technologically it's changed. That's been really significant. We all know about that. We don't have to get it, parse that. But I think, I just want to go back to something that pretty much all the other panelists have said about making connections. That's one thread that's the same. Rather than say how it's changed, that I think that's the same. And I also think something else about that really hasn't changed and is maybe even more significant is to be present in everything you do as a performer. To be totally there. Whether it's just playing one tune for a little event like this, which is significant unto itself because it does have an emotional connection for a lot of reasons, or if you're doing a gig that you think maybe you really don't want to do. Yeah, I've got a loud voice anyway. They can probably hear me out in the street, but you know, it's just be the fullest self you can be, whatever you're doing as a performer. I don't know, maybe that spills over into being a human, but and then things will follow from that, hopefully. That said, it's ups and downs. That's life.
Yeah.
No?
I would say also another question for all of you guys, I guess, is sort of what are the challenges you face in working with other musicians? I know also specifically because you produce for other people. So what are the challenges and the advantages of, you know, producing music for other people? Do their ideas get in the way of your ideas? And like, how do you work with relationships with other musicians who can be, you know, a little...
Yeah, I think the way I balanced it out is that, again, financially, I think as business people, because we always have to have that business mindset as well, I've been fortunate enough to not take on too many projects that kill the creative vibe with me. I feel like it's a very sacred place. So if I'm working with musicians, and I've been in bands where there's incredibly technical, great players, but they suck to be in a room with for 6 hours, kind of kills that whole experience. So I feel like I take on jobs or gigs that speak to me professionally, but also more spiritually, again, to kind of like follow that path of not letting the business ruin the passion that I have for certain things. And I know that's tough to do sometimes because you do have to make money and pay bills and do these things, but I think if you do too much of that, you know, as a producer, if I'm pushing buttons for a musician that I don't really like love their music, I know I'm not really invested in it as much as I could be, and I try to take gigs that still kind of speak passionately to those things. So I think it's finding that balance, you know, and defining what success looks like. Are you going to just be somebody who's just going to take any gig that you want, or are you going to find other ways to make life happen, but also keep your creative path, you know, as in with as much integrity as you can, you know?
You sure you want me to get into that? Say your question again. I need to rephrase.
So I would say, like, how do you work with other musicians, and how do you find a way to be successful, you know, doing that and making music and still retaining, like, you know, commercial success?
All right. So this is a double question. There is the human interaction with people, such as how do you create a band? How do you, I don't know, like how do you interact? How does this happen? See, every human being is unique. You know, I know it's like a fashion, a modern fashion to think that one size fits all, you know, human beings are all the same, but every human being is unique. Everyone has his own personality, his own experience of life, his own takes on things. It's unique. Every human being is its own universe. And there is chemistry. So when you meet someone, there is chemistry or there is no chemistry. So, for example, when you have a band, like my band, we've been together for years, there is a chemistry, otherwise we wouldn't be playing together. It's not only that the guys are like amazing drummers and bass players and guitarists and violinists, whatever. There is also a natural chemistry. It's like interaction with people. You have a chemistry or you don't. It's okay. That's the way it is, you know? So I trust my instinct and I trust the instinct of the other. For example, what I like to do in my band, when we perform, I leave them a lot of space because I feel the chemistry is very good. So I let them also take lead on some things, you know, because they're going to do things a certain way, which sometimes I don't really like, but it's not the problem. They like it, and that's the best they're going to give, and it's the best it's going to sound. So I have to trust also and change a bit of myself to trust that the other in this place is going to have a better take than me. You know, even like stupid little things, like my bass player telling me, hey, I want to take the electric bass for this. I said, okay, I don't really want to, like, at first I'm kind of reluctant. Then he takes the electric bass, he plays, and it's amazing, and he was right. So, because I trusted him to know that he was right, he knows better, that's what he does. So I trust him, it's chemistry, you know. So that's how I like to do things. I like to be surrounded with people I like. Because life is short, you know, and every day is a celebration. So I don't need to surround myself with people that I don't like just to make money or something like that. I don't really care about that. You know, I can make calories otherwise than just money with people I don't like. So that's one thing. And what is the other part of the question? Oh yeah, the money aspect of things. Okay, so this is, I always, I chose nature over Prometheus. I chose the gods of nature against the gods of technology. That's my way, you know. And I always try to remember that as a human species, we are animals. We are animals. It's something to remember. We are part of the animal realm, you know. And we have an organic life, you know. And there are things that are very basic, like from our animal upbringing, the way we are, is we need to hunt to eat. So in a natural environment, you go, you hunt an animal and you eat the animal. You might sing a song at night to celebrate the gods of the night or something, whatever that is, you know. But nowadays, getting the calorie goes through getting money. It's just a tool, it's just a pathway. So you don't need to hunt. Someone is going to kill an animal, you're going to play music. Everyone is still hunting and gathering calories, but now it's called money, you know. Also, I go by that great parable in the New Testament. Don't worry, I'm not doing religious proselytism. I'm not a religious person, but I see it as a book of archetypes, and it's full of wisdom. But I love in the New Testament when the Pharisees try to get Jesus, and they tell him, you always talk about God, but what do we do? Do we need to pay our taxes? He said, well, what's on your coins? They're like, Caesar. Like, okay. So give back to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, give back to God what belongs to God. I really love this parable because there is give back to the business or the calorie or the material world, the hunting, whatever that is like very like concrete part of our like animal species, give it back to what it is. And then give it back to God, give back to the imagination, to the creativity, to the dreams and all, what belongs there, you know? There is like two places, but there is not one over the other. There is one that doesn't exist and the other that exists or whatever. It's both. There is a balance between both things, you know. We are in this world as an animal species. We need to survive. We need to eat every day and live our life. That's one thing. And but we're also alive. So both things must be taken in consideration. So that's how I see things, like in a very organic and natural way, you know. And I also follow my nature. That's the last thing. Plato. The Adelphi temple, know yourself, like the Apollo temple. Know yourself and you know the cosmos and the gods. That's one path. There is also Nietzsche, become what you are, Dionysos. So you follow both things and perhaps you'll be happy. I don't know.
That's the dream. Good answer. Thank you. Let me see. Yeah, so, Rich, how have you found working with other musicians? Because I know you were touring for a while, too.
Yeah, so I mean, when I was on tour, it was, you know, it was sort of like what we've all been talking about. Sometimes you like the people you're touring with, and then it all really falls into place, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes we tend to, I'll quote another great philosopher, Pogo said, "I've seen the enemy, and he is us." So, I mean, it's like sometimes when we defeat ourselves, and I think I actually, you know, suffered from that over the course of my touring career sometimes when I didn't like some of the people that I ended up doing gigs with. I kind of didn't find a way to morph into that more amenable, agreeable, always present person. That came with a little bit more time, and so I had to learn to find that. And I think that's probably great advice. In a way, I think a lot of people have said that kind of thing. I know the dancers were talking about that a bit, about I don't know, being present also, and being present in what you're doing. And so I think that's part of it, is being present with the people that you're working with. So that's real important, I think, and something that was certainly a thread in my career.
Yeah, thank you. I have two more questions. So, you went to music school.
Yeah, I did.
For performance, right?
I did, yeah. I went to New England Conservatory, and but I had dropped out of school for a while because I wasn't certain that I wanted to go to music school, and I studied with a guy privately for a while who said, "Man, you should go to New England Conservatory because, you know, you'll learn some stuff and whatever." So, got in by the skin of my teeth and worked pretty hard. But the one thing I'll just say about going to music school, because I know you were asking about film school, and I got to write for documentary scores for a number of years for two guys who had gone to NYU Films at Tisch Film School, but way back in the day. These guys are probably like in their 70s now, but they were real successful, and they had a lot of. So from talking about film school and then New England Conservatory, I mean, for me it was a great experience, except that unlike what these guys had at NYU, I felt like New England was more theoretical. They were more about you know, just the art and not enough of the putting it into practice and saying, well, what could you actually do to make some bucks, to marry making the bucks with being the artist, to marry the finding the calories with the spirit. So, you know, I could have used more of that at school. So I'd say if you're going to go to a music school, look for a school where they do that. I think they do more of that now at most of the schools, even at NEC. I've heard that they do.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Speaking of becoming well-rounded, you have like multiple pursuits of video and music, and as I started out, you know, just being a musician, and then I learned more about video, and then I got into like, you know, creating events and like seeing all the different sides of what music sort of interacts with, because it really is really connected with video. So how has that like changed the way you work and changed your creative process and everything like that?
Specifically with video?
Yeah.
I think, like every creative has said here, all of our talents and all of our personalities kind of come out. So being a teacher has influenced the way I create videos. Being a videographer has influenced the way I think about music. I think they all kind of go hand in hand. I think video has taught me a lot about visualizing music in a different way and having patience, and I think teaching has helped me have the patience, and also I really do still get a kick out of seeing people get excited about their potential about things and be excited about creating. So I think that collaborative process has helped me with music. So yeah, I think they all are different arms of the same kind of beast, just knowing yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you so much for coming, guys. How did you become a journalist?
Accidentally. Because although I think it's wonderful to choose it on purpose, it's one of those threads. I think Yasmeen had talked about it, that a lot of us have taken circuitous routes to being creatives. One thing I want to say is that a lot of creatives have imposter syndrome. I don't know where you're like, I'm not really a writer, I'm not really a journalist, I'm not an artist. And I wanted to acknowledge that there are amazing journalists in our town, people with Pulitzers, like Dan Barry, who writes for the New York Times and also is a published author, and another writer we had tried to get here today, who's a creative writer, Eliza Minot, and you might know her as Eliza Price. So she has 4 kids who are making their way through our school district. She is a published novelist, and she has a new novel coming out next year called In the Orchard. I have to plug the other writers. Right? We have to support each other. I became a journalist. I was an English literature major in college, and I was the first woman in my dad's side of the family to graduate from college. On my mom's side, I have a cousin who graduated a year ahead of me. So we were the first generation, which is not uncommon for somebody my age in our 50s, right? We're the first generation of college educated. I'm from Philadelphia. Philadelphia was 80% plus manufacturing economy at the beginning of the 20th century. And by the end of the 20th century, less than 20% manufacturing. So I came from generations of Philadelphians who worked in textiles mills and factories and, in labor. My dad worked for National Cash Register. He fixed cash registers. So going to college, my parents were like, well, we can't pay for that. I was a good student. I got a scholarship. They let me live at home for free. That was their contribution. And I was a good writer. I had a nun in high school named Sister Eileen who said, you can write, you should write. So I said, I'll be a literature major. I never dreamed of being a journalist. That seemed terrifying to me, having to go and ask questions of strange people I didn't know. But someone was talking about it's who you know, right? So I go to college, LaSalle University, a wonderful, wonderful college. Got a great education there. And I had a really wonderful professor named Mr. Keenan who thought I was smart, and he got me a job in a law firm as a proofreader. And it was this great job at $10 an hour. Anyway, it put me on the road to editorial work. So I wound up getting jobs after college as an editorial assistant. And in Philadelphia, everything was sort of education or medical writing at that time. What I should have done is got myself to New York City faster. And eventually I did that. And I wound up writing about economic development and urban planning at a small publishing company. And I went into that field and managed nonprofits, and then came back into writing. I've gone back and forth between nonprofit management, economic development, urban planning, and writing. And that's the thing, when you write, you learn about things and you're interested in things, and you gain skills. It's really, I love writing because it's how I process the world. It's how I understand things. I need to go back and take it apart and put it back together and explain it to someone, and then I understand it. So that's a long story. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So, you studied. So first, you went to college for English and literature, and then did you go into marketing and
No,
stuff
I
like
went
that?
I went into editorial work. I was an editorial assistant. My first job out of college, I was an editorial assistant at Advanced Cancer Research
Oh, wow.
It was the American Association for Cancer Research. So I'm not a cancer researcher, but I was editing, medical proofs for publication. We were sending letters to oncologists who were submitting their research. So somebody has to check to make sure all the commas and the periods are in the right place and that the grammar's right. And that's where you start out with a lot of publishing work and editing work. And you don't always get to be a writer right away. I don't know. That might have changed, though. It's a million years ago now.
Yeah. So let me see. So how did you start the Village Green? And
it's a good question. I had worked for a company called Patch. They launched in Maplewood, South Orange, and Millburn in February of 2009, and it was this effort to bring hyper-local, fully online journalism to the world. As the newspaper industry was really, people were saying it was dying. Print news has really gone through decades of retraction, and for a long time, everybody was saying journalism is dying. But journalism was shifting, and journalism was going online. So Patch launched in our towns. I started as a freelancer with them. I was, at that point, as a number of people talked about, trying to raise kids and trying to find something that was flexible enough but also provided an income. So I started as a freelancer for Patch. They said, oh, you're really good at this and you really know Maplewood. Because I had worked for the Springfield Avenue Partnership, I knew elected officials, I had kids in the school district, I understood the major issues that people were concerned about living here. So then they hired me full-time to be editor. Patch had a huge amount of venture capital behind it. It was acquired by AOL, and AOL decided it wasn't making quarterly profits. Then they cut all the staff. So I actually quit before they fired everyone. So Patch, it's now still around. You'll see Patch is still around, but they do more regional coverage. They're not going to send somebody to every Board of Education meeting. So I left Patch in 2012. I went and worked at Montclair State University. This is actually an entire day about Montclair State University. I was the deputy director for the Center for Cooperative Media and New Jersey News Commons, and it was about helping journalists start their own independent, hyper-local news sites. And it was great. We learned about what platform you need to be on, an advertising platform that you could put in, how to do your social media, how to set up your QuickBooks, all this stuff we were doing legally, how to set up a company. And I did that for a year and a half. And meanwhile, I would go shopping at King's, which is no longer there, and people would stop and say, we miss Patch. We miss knowing what's happening at the town meeting, knowing what's happening at the Board of Education. We miss that granular level of coverage. Please, please, please bring it back. So Carolyn Parisi and I, Carolyn was also a former Patch editor, we sat down one night in early 2014 and said, we can do this. I've been being trained how to do it. I'm training other people how to do it. Let's just do it. So we did it. And we've been doing it for 8 years, and I have been back working at Montclair State again during part of that to provide more income. But I can say that I was able to quit my job at Montclair State last fall, and my full income now is from Village Green, as is Carolyn's. It's a going venture. It is, we pay ourselves enough, and we pay our freelancers, and we have a bookkeeper, and so.
That's awesome. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So how do you manage your own business like that? How did you just start it up, and what were the challenges with starting it like that?
It was really actually pretty cheap to start. Carolyn and I each put in $2,000. We hired a developer who was a high school senior at the time. He, WordPress is a system that a lot of publications are on the internet, and it's pretty cheap to get a WordPress site started. It's pretty cheap to buy a URL from GoDaddy.
I did it. It was like
not too bad. You just have to remember to renew it when you get the email every couple of years. You don't want to lose your URL in all your marketing. It wasn't that expensive to start. I guess the biggest expense was we didn't make a lot of income right away.
Yeah.
We were really fortunate in that we immediately had some advertisers show up because of the reputation we had from Patch. People knew we could do it, and they trusted us, and they felt that we were good reporters. But it did take a few years to build the income we needed, and I think, but it's very important. We really want to do this not just because we're trying to make a living, but we know we won't do it forever, and at some point we sell it or pass it on or hire someone, and we want to be able to have anyone who lives here in this community at any economic level have a job and make a living being a reporter, and I think it's doable. It's the subscription model has really changed the game for us. We were all advertising when we started, and we went to a very hard paywall in the fall of 2019. We leave a lot of content outside our paywall, but we put key pieces behind the paywall where you just cannot read the story unless you pay, and that has generated a lot of income for us. I do want to say that anyone who ever wants a subscription and doesn't think it's in their budget can PM us or email us, and we will give it for free. And I don't even want to know why. Like, you don't have to say you're poor or anything like that. It's not always in your budget, We are all on a lot of subscription services. I think a lot of people are starting to quit certain subscription services. Like, that's why Netflix was going through. Yeah. Everybody's like, I'm not at home for a pandemic anymore, so I'm going to cut a few of these things. So anyway, but it works for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, yeah, I saw like an article about women entrepreneurs on your website, actually, and I was like, isn't this run by women too?
It is. It is. We
Did
are.
You guys write an article about yourselves?
Do we write an article about ourselves? We try. We try not to do that. In fact, I feel very uncomfortable being the person speaking. I like reporting other people. I like sitting there and writing about other people being up in front of an audience. But so yeah, we don't write about ourselves too often.
So how do you how do I word this question? How do you straight reporting sometimes can be a little bare, some people don't do it right. Like sometimes it's not interesting. Sometimes it's just the facts and no creativity around that. So how do you put creativity into the writing that you do when it's journalism like that?
That's a really interesting question. Hemingway was a journalist before he was, or as he was a creative writer. And I think a very famous sentence that people use from Hemingway, that's to help you be a good writer, is to just write one true sentence. I don't think good journalism is not creative writing. I don't know. I think every sentence you put together, you're just trying to write as clearly as possible to convey a message that you think is important. And I think you can learn to be a really good journalist, and it is good creative writing. They are different skills. I am 9 credits away from a master's in creative writing at Rutgers Newark. And I think what I've learned mostly from that process is that I'm a terrible fiction writer. So, because I want to keep reporting, and it can be different things. But I, like many people have said today, I love writing about policy. I love writing about what happens at the Board of Ed. I love development projects, like when there's a planning board meeting and they're saying, you know, how many units is this and how's it going to impact traffic and how's it going to impact the school district? I find it really fascinating and I really enjoy it and I find it very creative. So you're not trying to write fancy words. That's the thing about, if you're being a bad writer is saying, like, how can I jazz up this sentence? How can I make this fancy? Like, you should always know your audience. This is true for any kind of writing. Who is your audience? Is your audience yourself? And you're writing a diary, you're writing a journal. Is your audience your family? Is your audience the people of Maplewood and South Orange? Like, you'll have different audiences. And how in the most direct and compelling terms can you tell them the story they're trying to tell them? You shouldn't be overthinking it. You should be making it as simple as possible. And I think music is like that too. Like when you play that note and it's just beautiful and clear, and any creative endeavor, you make an image. Thank you for taking Susie's picture for fencing. Just a beautiful, it should tell the story and reach people, and it just should be easily understandable and accessible for everyone.
Yeah, that's a really great point to make. Thank you. I think I have one more question. I know you don't write novels, but how would you say the journalism industry is different or more challenging or less challenging than creative writing, like being a novelist and stuff like that? And also, there's also like I wouldn't say smaller, but like shorter form, like writing for marketing, writing for ads, writing for like media and stuff like that.
It's interesting because a lot of people who are, have published books and who are creative writers, they're also educators, they're also journalists. A lot of journalists I have seen, a lot of my former Patch colleagues have gone into marketing writing, public relations. So, and then sometimes they come back out of it and they do journalism again. So people have these really wending paths in their careers. Journalism is really hard. I know a lot of people who work for Gannett, I can say that, and they'll talk about how the wages aren't necessarily great, the benefits aren't necessarily great. I did do a little bit of research before this, just looking at Bureau of Labor Statistics, because I wanted to see if people are still saying that journalism is contracting. And because my feeling has been that it hasn't, that in the last few years, with the crisis of democracy in our country, there has been a huge support for journalism, investigative journalism, even local journalism like I do. After the 2016 presidential election, we saw a big uptick in subscriptions. People, not that we had anything to do with covering that, but people just were like, we need to support journalism because when you have these crises of leadership and democracy, you recognize that you need that more than anything. But Bureau of Labor Statistics is saying that journalism jobs are growing at 6% a year. They will from 2020 to 2030, and that is the average for jobs overall. So maybe we're back on a better footing. If you are a creative writer and you want to be a published novelist, that is a very tough road. There's other students that was in the program with at Rutgers Newark for creative writing. A lot of the writers in this graduate level program, but they were in their 20s, and you could see them just writing, sending things out to all different kinds of publications. You have to take a lot of rejection. And a lot of them had other jobs to support what they wanted to do. I know Eliza teaches as well, and Dan is a journalist, so I think a lot of writers, and I think of other published authors in our town, towns like Pamela Ahrens or Marina Budos. Marina teaches as well. Education is a theme throughout this as well. I think as a creative, that's a great way, to have multiple paths in your journey as a creative person.
It seems like a lot of creative people want to creatively, what's the word? What's the phrase? Like,
We want to pass it.
creatively
We wanna
make more
share.
creatives. Like, give their knowledge to younger people.
It's interesting because I don't know, the topic of competitiveness came up somewhere at some point, I think, today, and I think people who are creative are generally very generous, and they want everyone. They're like, oh, this is wonderful. This makes me feel so good. You should do this too, I feel that way about journalism. I think it might not be it's not a get-rich-quick thing. And starting your own independent hyperlocal news site is not a get-rich-quick venture. But it is so satisfying. It is really hard. I feel for the people we cover, the people who are elected in our town. They take a lot of heat. I don't know if they know if I feel this way because sometimes we feel at odds with each other. We take a lot of heat, depending on the topic. The two hottest topics in the last year I think that we've covered were masking in the schools, where parents were having very divergent opinions about whether their kids should remain masked, and another one was the turf field situation in Maplewood. And if we published something that was one side, we would hear from the other side, and trying to have balance, but also trying to make sure facts are always facts. You don't have to give equal balance to facts and not facts. In those two hot topic issues, everyone had facts on both sides. It was just depending on what outcome you wanted, different facts were important. And it can be really hard kind of bridging those tough topics. But it's worth it. It's so worth it. I think we have wonderful towns with incredibly engaged people, and that's why it's great living here.
That seems like it's always the case in, even in, I look more at like national journalism, and it seems that people always want to ignore the facts that don't support their side. And I don't know, like, how do you make sure that the facts stay the facts and that there's no misinformation being spread?
That's a good question. I feel like misinformation has not been a huge issue for us locally, because of our towns are, like those two topics, there wasn't a whole lot of misinformation, but we do, something that we started doing coming out of turf was we started getting these, people wanted us to keep posting op-eds. And we said, we're not taking any op-eds on this topic. Because we do, if we publish anything, we vet it. And there's often a misunderstanding about opinion pieces. Opinion pieces are not supposed to be fact-free. Yeah. It's not like, well, that's my opinion. You have to, opinion piece should not be published without facts. And we're a small entity. There's not a lot of, there's Carolyn and I running it. And we just can't sit around fact-checking everyone's work. We have to fact-check our own work. So we are trying more and more just to stick with our own reporting. We do a lot less opinion. People will send us stuff and we'll say, thank you. We probably aren't going to publish this, but we can include it in our reporting. But we do fact-check. So we do have to reject stuff. We do. So, and sometimes people get annoyed, but we say, hey, there's this thing called the internet. And it's a free-for-all, so
just go on Twitter.
Have a good time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. It's great to hear your perspective. You have a question?
Absolutely, young people know what journalism is, and they are going to be better than any of us old people. And there's wonderful journalism being taught at Columbia High School. There are wonderful teachers there. The Columbian is, year after year, one of the top high school newspapers in the country. It wins awards every year for that. We have paid freelancers who have been Columbia High School students and college students who've come out of there. Also, a number of journalism students from Montclair State University have worked as freelancers for us. I will say that Hadriana Lowenkron, Columbia High School class of 2018, and University of Pennsylvania class of 2022, is now a reporter at Bloomberg News, as is Sheree Taylor, same class at Columbia High School, Rutgers 2022. She's a reporter at Bloomberg. The two young women, both of whom have contributed to Village Green. Hadriana worked for us for years, and Hadriana did a lot of non-exciting stuff like posting press releases, just setting things up on the site, because you have to do that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I can't think of two better human beings on the planet than Hadriana and Sheree. And if they are journalists who are now out there in the world and they're working for Bloomberg, which is a really interesting employer, we're going to be in really good shape. They absolutely know.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? Well, if you have any questions for any of the panelists who are still around, feel free to just go up and talk to them. Everybody's really nice. If they're here, they're really, really nice.
If they're not here,
Promise.
they're at the bar around. I'm a journalist, okay?
Knows all
We
of
have
the
a
gossip.
reputation.
Anyways, thank you so much for coming, and thank you all so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a great night, everybody.